My name is Ren Bennett. I'm 36. 11 days ago, my mother rang my doorbell for the first time in over a decade. I knew it was her before I even reached the door. She stood there holding a foil-covered casserole in one arm and a folded sheet of paper in the other. She looked smaller than I remembered. Grayer, thinner through the shoulders. She didn't ask about her granddaughters. She said, "I think it's time we fixed what's broken, before it's too late for everybody," and held the paper out like she was passing me a business card. I unfolded it right there on the porch. It was a loan request, typed up in careful business letter formatting, asking for $340,000, with a blank line waiting at the bottom for my signature. Here's what she didn't know. Standing on my welcome mat, for 11 years, I'd been writing back to her. Not out loud, never to her face. Every October, after everyone else was asleep, I'd sit at my kitchen table and write her a letter telling her everything that had happened since the last one, then fold it, date it, and put it in a cedar box my husband built me. I never mailed a single one. There were 11 letters in that box the morning she knocked. There would be a 12th before the year was out. If you're new here, I'd love it if you hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd guess. I'm also drawing a picture while telling this story, and I hope you'll enjoy the finished artwork by the time the story ends. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. I grew up in Halden Creek, Kentucky, the kind of place where everybody knew exactly which family you belonged to before you'd said a word. My father, Harlan, ran the grain co-op for 27 years, a quiet man who sat alone on the porch a few minutes every evening before he ever came inside, like he was setting down some weight. My mother, Vivian, ran our church the way other women run companies. My sister Dawn got the family's whole share of easy confidence, crowned Dairy Days Princess 3 summers running, and my father called her Duchess before he ever used her real name. I was the quiet one, the one who balanced the church bake sale ledger to the penny by 12, and never once got so much as an ice cream cone for it. Affection in that house worked like water during a drought. There was only so much, and Dawn's cup got filled first every time. The day I left for college on a full scholarship, my mother barely spoke the whole drive down. Hugging me goodbye, she pressed a $20 bill into my palm. "Call collect if you ever need to. We'll always pick up." I carried that sentence around for 13 years like a coin in my pocket. It was the last kind thing she'd ever say to me. I was 22, finishing my accounting degree, when I met Cole Bennett, a 30-year-old electrician, in a beginner bookkeeping class. Around the third week, I noticed a wedding ring on a chain around his neck. His wife, Hannah, had died of cancer when their daughter was 2, and he was raising 5-year-old Junie by himself, no interest in hiding that just to make himself easier to fall for. I need you to understand what actually disqualified Cole in my mother's eyes, not the age gap, not that he worked with his hands. It was Junie, a little girl who'd already lost one mother, and who, in Vivian Calloway's private arithmetic, amounted to a debt my mother had no intention of ever inheriting. Junie didn't say one word to me for 7 months. She'd study me across the table like she was deciding if I was permanent or just a stray that might wander off. The first time she finally said my name, I excused myself to the bathroom so Cole wouldn't watch me cry over 4 letters. I brought Cole home twice. The first time, my mother asked him, right at the table, "And the little girl, she isn't yours by blood, is that correct?" The second time, she seated him at the far corner near the kitchen door and talked to Dawn the whole meal, like he wasn't in the room. My sister pulled me aside on my way out. "She's already decided he's not what she pictured for you. That's not going to change." I told her she was wrong. I was the one who turned out to be wrong. Cole proposed on a Thursday night, cross-legged on the unfinished plywood subfloor of the kitchen he was renovating. No speech prepared, he just looked at me and said, "I want you in this house for good. I want you to be the 3rd name on our mailbox, if you'll let us have you." I said yes with sawdust still in my hair. I called my mother that same night. She let the phone ring 4 times before answering. After 13 seconds of silence, she said, "Ren, honey, you'd be raising someone else's grief for the rest of your life. Have you actually thought that through? Not congratulations. A diagnosis. My father picked up the extension, breathed in like he might say something and didn't. 2 days later, Dawn texted me 4 words. Mom hasn't stopped crying. I was happy, actually, for the first time in years. 9 days later, a letter arrived. 2 full pages of cream stationery. I can still recite the final paragraph. A man who comes to you with someone else's family already built is not a beginning. Ren, he is an ending, and that little girl will always come first, ahead of any children you have of your own blood, for the rest of your life. If you marry him, you are choosing another woman's daughter over your own mother, and you will not be welcome in this house again until you understand exactly what that choice costs you. I folded it back along its creases and put it in the top drawer of my desk. Some part of me already understood that someday, somebody was going to need the receipts. We got married on the back lawn of Cole's aunt's farm, 22 folding chairs, every one filled with somebody who genuinely loved us. Junie was our flower girl. She refused to walk the aisle unless she could also carry the ring pillow, so she carried both, scattering wildflowers with one hand and clutching velvet with the other. My dress cost $40 at a consignment shop. Cole wore the same suit he'd worn to Hannah's funeral 3 years earlier. He never believed in hiding the hard parts of himself from me. Hannah's mother, Pearl, drove in with a tray of deviled eggs and pinned a sprig of rosemary to my dress before the ceremony. For remembrance, she said, taking both my hands. Hannah would have liked you a great deal. That's the only blessing that matters here, and you've already got it. No father walked me down that aisle. There was no aisle, really, just grass and a preacher who stumbled twice over my new last name. 10 days after the wedding, I mailed her a photo from that night, with a few lines on the back saying the door was open whenever she was ready. 3 weeks later it came back, still taped shut, a sticker over her name reading "Return to Sender." That was the beginning of the cedar box. That October, I sat alone at our table and wrote my mother 4 pages about the wedding, about Junie's laugh, about how drywall dust never fully left my hair that whole first year. I dated it. October, year 1. And put it in a drawer instead of a mailbox. I told myself I'd send it once I found the courage. I never did. The next October, I wrote another one. And the one after that. Cole quit his crew and started Bennett Electric out of our garage with $400 of tools. I kept the books at night after my shift at the insurance office, cross-legged on the concrete floor with a calculator and a legal pad, because we couldn't afford software yet. That same year, a client's barn caught fire from a panel Cole had signed off on, and for 10 days we didn't know if the business would survive the investigation. Pearl showed up on the 3rd day, unasked, took both girls for the week, and pressed an envelope into my hand on her way out, $2,000, her entire emergency savings, no strings, no signature line. "You don't pay this back," she said. "You just pass it forward someday." I never forgot the difference between that envelope and the one my mother would hand me on my own porch, 9 years later. Our daughter Mari was born the following year, screaming through her first bath while Junie, then 11, stood at the hospital window holding her new sister's tiny sock, like the most important object she'd ever been trusted with. I mailed the hospital photo that same week. It came back 9 days later, tape never broken. Junie's class was assigned a family tree project that spring. She came home with my side of the page blank and asked, matter of fact, "Do I have a grandma I don't know about?" I told her the truth as gently as I could. She stared at the blank branch, then wrote, in careful 11-year-old handwriting, "Grandma Pearl, X2, and drew a second box connecting straight to me. That worksheet isn't in the cedar box. It's framed in our hallway, where I see it every morning. My sister Dawn married in year 5. I found out from a photo online, 4 days after the fact. I mailed monogrammed napkins anyway. They came back 5 weeks later, never opened. One small crack, though. A week after her wedding, Dawn texted Junie happy birthday from a number my mother didn't know she had, and never mentioned it again. I filed that away quietly, the way you notice a hairline crack in a foundation and decide not to mention it yet. By year 9, Bennett Electric had 16 employees and a specialty in solar retrofits nobody else in 3 counties had learned. A regional energy company made an offer, and we sold 60% of a company we'd started, with $400 for just over $26 million. A local paper ran a feature, and somebody in Halden Creek printed it out and left it in the fellowship hall, exactly where my mother would find it. Which brings us back to my porch 11 days ago. She told me it was for my father's knee replacement and the mortgage the bank had started threatening to call. I only learned later, from Dawn, that a third of that figure was quietly earmarked for Dawn's boutique, losing money for 2 straight years, a detail my mother never mentioned. I invited her into the kitchen, made coffee out of old habit, and set her folded loan paper on the table. Then I brought out the cedar box and set it down beside it, close enough to touch. You want to know what's in here? I tapped the lid once. 11 years of me writing to you every October, telling you everything you missed, and never once mailing a single page, because I already knew what would happen to it if I did. She didn't answer. Her eyes had gone to the box and stayed there. Somebody at that church printed out an article with our names in it, I said. And for the first time in 11 years, coming here finally looked worth the gas money. Her hands went flat against the table. For 1 second, something in her face stopped being a performance, fear that had been living underneath anger so long it had forgotten every other way out. If I ever let myself really look at any of it, she said, so quiet I nearly lost the words, I'd have to admit I built this whole family off a pattern I cut out before you were even born. She caught herself, chin coming back up like a door swinging shut. But you're the one who walked out for him, Ren. Nobody made that choice but you. For one small, humiliating second, some old part of me, the part that had spent 13 years still believing in a promise made in a dorm parking lot, wanted to just sign the paper. Make the ache stop. I let that feeling move through me like weather passing overhead. Then I let it go. The back door opened. Cole came in first, work boots on, sawdust down both forearms. Junie was right behind him, 19 now, home early from her shift at the diner. She stopped when she saw my mother, studied her the way her father studies a wiring diagram, and asked, without a drop of malice, just plain curiosity, "Are you the grandma who sent our pictures back?" My mother didn't answer that one either. I stood up. That check isn't happening today, Mom. It's not about what's in our accounts. It's about what you'd let yourself believe the second you had my signature. You'd walk out of here and tell yourself 11 years got repaired over one afternoon of coffee. You'd tell Dawn the same thing. You'd tell the whole fellowship hall the same thing. And none of it would be true. I slid the cedar box an inch closer to her. You're welcome to read every one of these, if you actually want to know what you missed. Or you can take your paper and go home and keep believing whichever version costs you less. But there's no version of today where you leave here with a signed check, and I still believe you drove 4 hours for me. She looked at the box for a long moment. She never opened it. She stood, smoothed her cardigan, picked up her paper, and walked to the door. She paused there, one hand on the frame. For a heartbeat, I let myself think she might turn around. She didn't. The door clicked shut quiet, not a slam, the sound of someone choosing, for the second time, to walk away. Has anyone in your life ever come back around right after your circumstances changed for the better? I'd genuinely like to hear that story. Tell me in the comments. I read every one, even the long ones. My father never called. Neither did my mother, not once, in the 11 days since. Dawn reached out about 6 weeks later, not an apology exactly, more like the first honest sentence she'd said to me in a decade. She was leaving Halden Creek for good, the boutique, the seating chart of who sits where at Sunday dinner. She only asked, quietly, if someday she might meet her nieces. I told her someday wasn't the same as no. I'm trying to be at peace with not knowing yet. That October, I sat back down and wrote letter number 12, but this time not to my mother. I wrote it to Junie and Mari, for whenever they're old enough to ask why one side of their family tree stayed empty. I told them everything. The casserole, the cedar box, the $340,000, the 19-year-old girl who asked the only question in that kitchen that mattered. I sealed it and set it on top of 11 years of words that were never really about persuading my mother to come back. They were about making sure my girls would have the receipts. Here's what 11 Octobers taught me. Family was never the people who happened to share your blood type. It wasn't a $20 bill and a promise to always pick up the phone, a promise with an expiration date nobody mentioned. Family was Pearl, driving 40 minutes every week to rock a baby who wasn't hers by any measure except love. Family was a little girl who took 7 months to trust me with her own name and never once took it back. Family is whoever keeps showing up on your ordinary Tuesdays, not just the one Tuesday your name happens to land in the newspaper. If any part of tonight's story reminded you that you were never the debt in somebody else's ledger, send it to whoever needs to hear that tonight. Drop a comment. Hit subscribe if this is your first time here. I'll see you in the next one.